The morning rush had barely started when the diner door slammed open. Everyone froze. A tall man in a black jacket, covered in dust and tattoos, stepped inside, and silence swallowed the room. Whispers began. Some customers reached for their phones, others just stared. But one woman behind the counter didn't flinch. She didn't see a threat. She saw a tired man who hadn't eaten in days. What she didn't know was that a few minutes later, the police would arrive, and everything in that diner would change. Why would 300 bikers show up at her door the very next morning? Margaret Lewis had been running her little diner off Highway 17 for nearly 15 years. The kind of place where the coffee was always hot, the pie was always fresh, and everyone knew each other's stories by heart. Her mornings started before sunrise. The hum of the old coffee machine, the hiss of bacon on the grill, and the quiet comfort of routine. To the regulars, she wasn't just the owner. She was family. A warm smile, a kind word. A woman who never forgot your order or your worries. She'd lived through hard times, but kindness had become her habit, like breathing. Still, beneath that calm rhythm of clinking cups and soft chatter, the town had its unspoken lines. Outsiders weren't always welcomed easily, especially those who didn't look like they belonged. Margaret had seen it before. The tense silence when a stranger walked in, the way eyes darted and shoulders stiffened. That morning, though, something felt different. The air was heavier, the chatter quieter. As the sun spilled through the diner windows, a low rumble echoed from down the road. The sound of engines, deep and distant. Some of the customers exchanged worried glances. Margaret didn't think much of it. She wiped her hands on her apron and smiled, ready to serve whoever came through that door. She believed in one simple rule. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. But in the next few minutes, she'd be tested in ways she never imagined. The bell above the diner door jingled, and every head turned. A man stepped in, tall, broad, with a leather jacket marked by years of wind and dust. His beard was thick, his knuckles scarred, and a faded tattoo peeked from under his sleeve. The room fell silent. Forks paused midair. Someone whispered, "He's one of them." Margaret noticed the fear spreading like a shadow. The man didn't look angry, just tired. His eyes held something deeper, the look of someone who'd been judged too many times. "Coffee?" she asked gently. He hesitated, surprised. Most people avoided eye contact, but she met his gaze without flinching. "Please," he muttered. As she poured his cup, the tension thickened. Two men by the window stood up and left, tossing cash on the table without a word. Another whispered something about calling the sheriff. Margaret's heart tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You hungry?" she asked. He nodded quietly. "Haven't eaten since yesterday." That was all she needed to hear. Within minutes, a plate of eggs and toast sat in front of him. He looked down, then up at her, his voice low. "No one's treated me like this in a long time." Outside, the low rumble of engines grew louder. Two police cars slowed near the diner, their lights flashing softly. Customers peeked through the windows, murmuring. One officer stepped in. "Ma'am, everything all right here?" Margaret's hand trembled just slightly as she wiped the counter. "Everything's fine, officer. He's just having breakfast." The officer studied the man for a long, heavy moment. Then reluctantly he nodded and stepped back outside. The diner remained silent. The man finished his meal, left a few crumpled bills on the table, and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." When he walked out, no one said a word. But Margaret could feel their stares, questioning her kindness. And somewhere deep down, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. The next morning, Margaret pulled into the diner just as the sun broke over the horizon. The air was still, almost too still, until she heard it. A deep, rolling thunder. Not from the sky, but from the road. Engines. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Within minutes, the quiet highway was swallowed by the sound of motorcycles. Black jackets, chrome gleaming, engines roaring like a heartbeat that shook the earth itself. Margaret froze at the door, her coffee mug trembling in her hand. One by one, the bikes lined up outside her little diner, stretching down the road farther than she could see. People from nearby shops stepped out, eyes wide, unsure whether to run or watch. And then she saw him, the same man from yesterday, walking toward her, helmet under his arm, a soft smile cutting through the noise. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "We just came to say thank you." Her heart pounded as dozens of bikers dismounted, nodding respectfully. Some brought flowers, others held envelopes. A few simply said, "You did the right thing." The same townspeople who had whispered behind her back now watched in stunned silence. Margaret's diner, the same small place that once held judgment and fear, was surrounded by gratitude. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The man placed his hand over his chest. "You showed kindness when no one else did. We don't forget that." And just like that, the engines roared again, not in threat, but in unity. The sound was thunder, but it felt like applause. Margaret wiped her eyes, realizing her small act had started something far bigger than she ever imagined. When the last bike disappeared down the highway, the diner was left in a stunned silence. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, but something else had filled the room. Respect. That day, the same neighbors who once questioned Margaret's kindness began to see her differently. Word spread through town faster than the engines themselves. Reporters called, strangers stopped by just to meet the woman who stood up for what was right. But Margaret never saw it that way. She hadn't made a stand. She'd simply refused to judge a man by his jacket. The diner soon became a symbol of quiet courage, a reminder that kindness doesn't need an audience, just a heartbeat willing to act. The booth where the biker had sat stayed open for weeks, and people often left small notes there. Some thanked her for her bravery. Others admitted they'd learned something that day. Late one evening, as the sun dipped low and the highway glowed gold, Margaret looked out at the empty road and whispered to herself, "All I did was serve breakfast. But sometimes, it's the smallest acts that echo the loudest." And maybe, just maybe, the world would be a different place if more people chose compassion over fear. What would you have done if you were standing behind that counter,